People say children don't remember anything, but sometimes a child's heart remembers what the mind cannot explain. And if anyone had told Rosa that her quiet little daughter could recognize someone she had never met, she would have smiled politely and dismissed it as superstition. Yet that morning, something happened that would shake every belief she held about fate, memory, and unseen connections. It began like any ordinary day, the kind Rosa had survived for years, until one moment flipped everything upside down. At 6:10 a.m., Rosa's alarm buzzed, slicing through the thick silence of their tiny apartment. She felt the familiar heaviness in her chest, not sadness exactly but the weight of responsibility. Her daughter, Alina, barely 2 years old, was curled against her side, small fingers resting on Rosa's shirt as if afraid she'd disappear overnight. Alina rarely let go of her. She avoided strangers, avoided noise, avoided anything unfamiliar. Even neighbors she saw daily couldn't get a smile from her. Outside, a storm rumbled, shaking the window. Rosa whispered, "Mama has to go to work, sweetheart." But Alina buried her face deeper, trembling. Then Rosa's phone vibrated, a message from the elderly neighbor who usually watched Alina. "I'm sorry, dear. I'm unwell today. I can't watch the little one." Rosa's stomach twisted. She had no backup, no family nearby, no one who could help. She stared at her daughter's frightened little face. Missing a shift meant losing hours she desperately needed. Taking Alina with her meant risking the only job keeping them afloat. But she had no choice. She dressed the child gently, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. And as she held Alina close and stepped into the storm, she had no idea that within hours her life, and her daughter's, would take a turn she never could have imagined. A turn that began with a stranger she wasn't meant to meet. By the time Rosa reached the towering building where she worked, the storm had softened but her heart hadn't. She held Alina tightly, praying the child wouldn't cry. Employees streamed inside with confidence and purpose, their polished shoes clicking against marble floors. Rosa, in her simple uniform, blended in like a shadow meant to stay unnoticed. Yet the moment she stepped into the lobby with a child in her arms, a few eyes lingered on her, curious, confused, slightly disapproving. Alina turned her face away, gripping Rosa's collar like a lifeline. Rosa whispered, "Just stay close to Mama. We'll get through this." But deep down, she feared what would happen if her supervisor saw her. As she hurried toward the service elevator, she felt Alina's small heartbeat thumping fast against her own. Inside the maintenance room, Rosa set her daughter on a chair and handed her a tiny stuffed bear. "I'll be right here. You'll be okay." Alina didn't answer, she just stared at the door as if it were a threat waiting to move. Then Rosa's radio crackled sharply. "Rosa, we need you upstairs. Executive floor. Right away." Her breath caught. That floor was the one she always avoided, quiet, spotless, run by people far above her world. She looked at Alina. Leaving her wasn't an option. Bringing her felt dangerous. But she didn't have time to choose. She lifted her daughter again and whispered, "Please, just today. Please." And as the elevator doors slid shut, carrying them upward, Rosa had no idea that someone on that floor was about to change everything she thought she knew about fear, trust, and fate. When the elevator reached the executive floor, the doors opened to a silence that felt almost too perfect, like the air itself had been polished. Everything gleamed. The glass walls, the chrome railings, even the floor tiles that reflected the lights like tiny stars. Rosa felt suddenly small, like she was stepping into a world not meant for her. She shifted Alina on her hip as the little girl pressed her face into her mother's shoulder, trying to disappear. Rosa quietly set her daughter on a cushioned bench just outside the conference room and knelt in front of her. "Mama will be right there, only a few steps away," she whispered. Alina's eyes widened, frightened but trusting. She didn't cry, she simply clung to her bear with both hands, watching her mother with a fear too big for her tiny body. Inside the conference room, a spilled cup of tea had left a large stain across the pristine table and carpet. Rosa rushed to clean it, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She needed to finish fast. Every second felt like a fragile thread that could snap. Then the door opened. Footsteps entered, steady, confident, belonging to someone who didn't need to announce himself. Rosa didn't look up at first, until she felt the sudden shift in the room as if even the air paused. Finally she lifted her gaze and froze. A man stood there, tall, composed, with a presence that whispered influence without trying. He wasn't familiar, yet something about him made Rosa's breath catch. Before she could speak, his eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward the little girl sitting alone. And in that instant, something flickered in his expression. Not annoyance. Not confusion. Something far more unexpected, and far more unsettling. Rosa instinctively stepped between the man and her daughter, though he hadn't moved toward Alina. Something in his gaze, sharp yet strangely unsettled, made her pulse race. For a moment he didn't say a word. His attention shifted from Rosa to the small girl on the bench, as if trying to make sense of something only he felt. "I didn't know anyone was in here," he finally said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of surprise. Rosa quickly lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. I just needed to finish cleaning. My daughter, she had to come with me today." She hated how nervous she sounded, but she couldn't help it. She was standing in front of someone who belonged to a world so far above hers that she could barely imagine stepping into it. Alina peeked up at the man, her tiny hands tightening around her stuffed bear. Usually she would hide, tremble, or cry when strangers were near. But this time she just stared, wide-eyed, confused, almost searching. The man took one slow step forward, and Rosa reacted immediately. "Please, she gets scared easily," she whispered, lifting a protective hand. The man paused, respecting the distance, though something in his expression softened, almost as if he recognized that fear from somewhere deep within himself. He nodded gently, but his eyes never left Alina. It was as if he was trying to recall a memory he didn't realize he'd forgotten. Rosa sensed it too, an odd tension in the air, like invisible threads pulling two strangers toward something neither understood. Then from down the hall, hurried footsteps approached. A voice called his name with urgency. The man glanced toward the sound, then back at Alina. And for the briefest moment, a strange, quiet emotion passed over his face, an emotion that made Rosa feel that whatever was happening was only just beginning. The footsteps in the hallway grew louder, but the man didn't look away from Alina. Something about the child held him there, held him still, as if the rest of the world had momentarily gone quiet. Rosa sensed it and felt her chest tighten. Why was he looking at her daughter like that? Not with suspicion, but with an expression she couldn't name. A mix of longing, confusion, and something almost tender. A young assistant appeared at the doorway, slightly out of breath. "Sir, they're waiting for you in the main boardroom. The presentation can't start without you." The assistant's words broke the strange silence between Rosa and the man. He nodded once but didn't immediately turn away. Instead, he glanced down at the small stuffed bear clutched in Alina's hands, then at the way her eyes followed him without fear. It was the first time Rosa had ever seen her daughter look at a stranger like that. Rosa gently stroked Alina's hair, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart." But her voice trembled. She felt as if something fragile was hanging in the air, something she didn't understand but couldn't ignore. Finally, the man spoke again, softer this time. "What's her name?" Rosa hesitated. No executive had ever asked her anything personal before. "Alina," she answered quietly. His eyes softened further, that same unsettled emotion flickering again. "She reminds me of someone." The way he said it made Rosa's heart pause. He took a small breath as if steadying himself, then stepped back toward the hallway. But before he disappeared, he glanced at Alina once more, almost as if leaving felt wrong. Alina didn't reach for him, but her tiny body leaned the slightest bit forward, as though drawn by something she couldn't understand. And as the door slowly closed behind him, Rosa felt it deep in her bones. This wasn't the end of their encounter. It was the beginning of something she could not yet name, something quietly waiting just beyond the moment. Rosa gathered her cleaning supplies, trying to calm the strange uneasiness swirling inside her. She kept glancing at the doorway where the man had disappeared, half expecting him to return. But the hallway remained still. Only the faint hum of office lights filled the silence now. She lifted Alina into her arms, pressing a soft kiss to her hair. "We're almost done, little one," she whispered, though her mind was far from settled. As she moved toward the elevator, Alina suddenly turned her head, staring down the corridor with unusual focus. Her tiny hand reached outward as if sensing someone who wasn't there. Rosa followed her gaze, but the hallway was empty. "What is it?" she murmured, but Alina didn't answer, just kept reaching, her eyes shining with a quiet yearning Rosa didn't understand. Before she could step into the elevator, her radio crackled again. "Rosa, they need you back on the executive side. There's another spill." Rosa closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. She returned to the conference wing, expecting another mess, another hurried cleanup. But when she stepped inside the room, her breath caught. The man was there again. He stood by the window, looking out at the city as if searching for answers. When he heard her footsteps, he turned, not with the cool professionalism she expected, but with an expression almost vulnerable. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I asked for you. Rosa froze. Is something wrong? He shook his head slowly as if words were failing him. Then his gaze drifted to Alina, who lifted her head, and for the first time, lifted her arms toward him. Rosa felt her heart drop. Alina never did that. Never reached for anyone. The man's breath hitched, his eyes glistening with a feeling he couldn't hide. He stepped closer, hesitating only a moment before gently taking Alina into his arms. The child settled instantly against him as if she had known him forever. Rosa watched, stunned, as a truth she couldn't explain began to settle around them like a whisper from another life, quiet, impossible, yet undeniably real. And she knew, in that fragile, breathless moment, that their lives were about to change in ways none of them could have imagined.